So welcome everybody. I saw some of you on the town hall earlier today. Who was on the town hall earlier today? Anybody? I know I saw some people. I know I saw Milani, but she may not be here right now. All right, so maybe none of you. If you weren't here earlier, I really encourage you. Alyssa sent an email earlier today or yesterday, I think. There's a link in there. There's another one of these town halls on Thursday. Please join if you can. It's about an hour. And we've got some semi-critical folks who are not only important, I think, for you all to meet and to get to know for your own work. Eric from the Day One Project and Melissa from NIMSY, and people from all over the country. And the purpose of these town halls is for leaders in different ecosystems and leaders in the broader sense of the word, not Alyssa, not the Alyssas, but the yous, the people who are actually kind of doing all the work with your different organizations in these ecosystems, to come together to learn a little bit more about what high quality policy documents look like, and then to gather some data information on your needs. That data and information in turn is being used to write a report that's being presented to all sorts of fancy people. Alyssa, I know you're having some internet issues. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what the target of this report is?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I may turn off my camera if I start getting, am I sounding okay right now?
You're
Okay,
going
great.
in and out. I'd turn your camera off.
Yep.
Let's do it. Bye, Alyssa's face.
So this report has several intended audiences. One of them is the Day One Project, which is, a nonpartisan think tank. And what they do is they get STEM policy recommendations ready for the next administration. We have developed a relationship with the Day One Project. As Jeremy mentioned, we had their senior policy advisor on our webinar earlier today. So they will be one of the intended audiences for this report that we're creating. This other audiences include the administration in general, federal agencies, and then our plan is to distribute this pretty broadly to state leaders as well. The Day One Project, and I didn't explain that well enough quite yet, the Day One Project really has the ear of all new administrations. They gather, really well thought out ideas for how to improve STEM policies across the country, and then present those ideas to the new administration to take up as, action and agenda items. We're not going to stop at just the Day One Project. We're also going to distribute to federal agencies as well. So it's a pretty ambitious project. We're off to an amazing start. There were 400 or so people on today's town hall session, and Thursday's session is expected to, gather about another 400 or so leaders. And then we will be starting the process of crafting this report. Jeremy, do you want to explain more, or do you want me to keep going?
No, I can take a little bit from there, because I know we are all going to think happy thoughts about Alyssa's terrible internet connection, the worst internet connection I've ever seen, and hope that gets resolved so she can come back in and out. But I'll cover for a little bit. So the idea again of this report is to gather actionable things, and that's a lot of what we heard from the Day One Project folks. Is that what happens in most of the policy documents that get submitted to new administrations is a whole lot of, here's a big problem we have. And the problem is that due to a lot of factors, which if you come on Thursday, you'll hear more about from Eric, here's the problem we have: documents get buried and ignored forever. Because when you think about the bureaucracy and the structure of the executive branch, there's just not a whole lot that can be done. So instead, what these are positioned as are very short, very succinct, and very targeted documents that are both a problem and a smaller scale solution that we know works, looking for resources to expand. So that's kind of the goal here. And there's this big report that Alyssa's working on with some other folks, that's being submitted to all these people. We're also working with the Day One Project to submit a number of other policy proposals, from not just NeoSTEM, from around the country. And if you visit their website, which in a second when I'm not talking, I'll link in the chat just in case you don't find it quickly. You'll see that the policy documents that they have put together are not by nobodies you've never heard of. These are heavy hitters and heavy hitter organizations. These are the heads of CS for All, the heads of ISTE, the heads of different major national and international organizations that are writing these documents. And what we're hoping, and we have some indication from the Day One folks, is that individual ecosystems and members of those ecosystems can be among those documents. So that's a lot of what we're looking for in that work. Is there's some breakouts to gather some information that'll be used for the report writing, and also we are looking for some individual ecosystems to kind of do a deeper dive into the work of the ecosystem, to create these documents. So if you can attend on Thursday's session, which is 1 o'clock on Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern, you should have gotten an email from Alyssa. If you didn't, go ahead and shoot her a message, and we will kind of go from there and get you involved. But it's really a cool opportunity to get your name, the name of your organization, in front of a big national audience, including the next administration. So that's really the goal of that meeting. And to extend it a little bit, it's a goal of today as well. So this is really a first for TIES and for the STEM learning ecosystems, as we identify this big document to make STEM better. Today's call was really critical for the ecosystems broadly, and now the NeoSTEM ecosystem, because we have this new administration coming in who I've been told that I should be bipartisan, and man, I swear I normally am. So you'll have to forgive me for when I say it's really exciting that this administration has expressed a willingness to listen and to learn and to act in the name of STEM, in the name of education, and in the name of equity. Equity in STEM is a really critical priority for the new administration, and STEM has never been more important than it is now for our country among the pandemic and with this global health crisis. We need STEM to ensure a world and a planet that thrives. So as leaders of one of the regional STEM learning ecosystems, we believe that your voice is how that's going to be heard. So that's really what we hope to talk about today. Sorry, I'm just lost my document, which is super fun.
Sure.
Alyssa, are you still
Jeremy,
there?
I
Yeah.
can. Oh, let me jump in just for a second. So we're hoping today to go into some breakout rooms to tackle a few questions that we'll introduce to you in just a minute. But before we do that, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update about the work that were working on in December. Um, as you may remember, that for the last few meetings of 2020, we spent some time thinking and talking about and identifying the greatest unmet STEM needs for the students we all seek to serve. So, as you recall, I'm sure, the priority that ranked the highest was figuring out ways to make STEM more visible and accessible to underserved students. So we've made a whole lot of progress on that initiative. You can remember probably when we were working on those Padlets and doing some free-flowing brainstorming for ways of making STEM more visible and accessible for students in our communities. So we've taken some next steps on that community awareness building campaign, and we've reached out to Dr. Terrence Robinson for some possible help with this, including potentially convening a planning committee that would more or less take charge of this initiative, take all of the work that we did in the latter half of 2020 and form it into a campaign. We have some interest, some very strong interest from many other partners who are interested in joining us in this initiative. They think it's a fabulous idea. They're super jazzed about the idea of, making STEM careers much more visible, making the people, featuring people who look like underserved students who are holding STEM positions. And that was an idea directly from you guys in one of our recent meetings. So Terrence, I mentioned you, and I'm wondering if you might turn on your camera for a second and say hello, because in the next few weeks, hopefully you'll all be hearing from Terrence, and I wanted you to be able to connect a face with a name. Terrence.
We're having all sorts of luck. Terrence, you are unmuted, but nobody is hearing you.
Okay.
All right, let's go back to him in a little bit.
Yeah. Let's march on.
It might,
then, Jeremy.
Alyssa and Jeremy, it might be that is Veronica. Hello, everyone. It might be that, Terrence, you need to press *6 to unmute.
Can you guys hear me now?
Hey, Terrence, how are you?
Okay, I'm good. I'm good. Veronica, it's good to hear your voice again. Jeremy, it's good to see you. And hello to everyone that I have not met before, but hopefully I'm looking forward to working with on this project. But yeah, I was so happy to hear from Alyssa when she reached out to me about this opportunity. And just some background on myself. The work that I've been primarily involved with over the past 5 or 6 years, when I first came in contact with the STEM ecosystem, is building out pathways and non-traditional pathways for students. When I first connected with the STEM ecosystem, the Northeast Ohio STEM ecosystem and the TIES organization, I was at Magnet and I was over their early college, early career program. And I built that program from scratch, but it was basically how do we build out a manufacturing apprenticeship program that's incorporated with partnerships with our high schools as well as our community colleges. Since that time, I've gone to work with other nonprofit organizations to where we have focused on building out career pathways. Still a lot of relationships with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District as well as surrounding inner ring school districts on how do we begin to work with students to not just expose them and say, hey, here are careers that you can entertain or that you might possibly want to engage with, but how do we build out structured pathways that will really give a young person an opportunity to engage in a career that they traditionally may not have been exposed to. And so it's very exciting for me to work on this effort because as Jeremy mentioned, the STEM fields are those fields that can offer economic opportunity, especially from the other underrepresented communities, that could give a person a family sustainable wage and even open up doors to creating family and generational wealth. That is the new middle class opportunities. And unfortunately, a lot of young people in many of our urban areas and even our inner ring suburban areas are not getting the necessary exposure to all of the entire gamut of what those careers look like, individuals that look like them in those careers, as well as the opportunities to, while they are young and inquisitive and before they may have made life-altering mistakes, to get some type of hands-on experience in those careers. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity. I still have to get some information back to you, Alyssa. I did see your email earlier, and I will get that to you this afternoon, this evening. But I'm very excited to be reconnected with the Northeast Ohio STEM ecosystem and looking forward to doing some great things over the next few months.
Thank you so much, Terrence. Dr. Robinson, thank you. Really are thrilled to be working.
So thank you, Terrence. All right, so I think the plan now is for you all to discuss in some groups the same types of questions that were discussed during the larger town hall meeting earlier today and again Thursday. So specifically those questions are, and you're going to get a link in the chat here in just a second to take you to a notes-taking document, but how can the Biden-Harris administration improve equity and access to STEM education and stronger STEM career pipelines in your community? What can the administration do to advance state, regional, and local STEM priorities and initiatives that create economic opportunities for improving lives and communities? And finally, how can the administration work to eliminate barriers to early childhood in STEM education? So that's what we're hoping that you'll discuss and take some notes in a document that we can use as part of a deeper dive into the NeoSTEM ecosystem as part of this larger report. The hopefully exciting part to you, it would be to me at least, is that your names and your organizational names will be part of this document. So it's something that you'll be able to share with the other folks and leaders at your organizations. Two things to keep in mind, I think, and Alyssa, please let me know if there are more, but two things that are really critical to keep in mind are, number one, you can think about a need for funding. You can put down, we have a need for funding. You probably should go ahead and just do it because we all have a need for funding. But I wouldn't spend a ton of time writing that down because everybody knows. The folks at the administration know funding is a priority. So what we'd really like you to think about is, what are the policy needs? What are the things that need to be changed from a policy perspective to help with that work? So not just from a funding perspective, but other work. And number two, and this is really critical, I mentioned it once a little bit earlier, don't just think about the problem. Try to think about whether it's in your own organization, other regional organizations, or organizations from outside of Northeast Ohio that you're familiar with, who has thought about and succeeded in tackling this problem that you're talking about. What are the solutions? What's the action? What are the solutions? We're going to have, as we understand it, a lot more luck getting traction when we are talking about funding, but we are also talking about those non-funding needs, and when we are talking about solutions that are proven and just need to grow. So that's really going to be hopefully the key part of that conversation. You should see over in the chat that link. Go ahead and click on that link now. If you remember, those links will go away when you move to your breakout group. So we're going to jump into those groups now, and we will pull you back in a little bit. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for taking that time to discuss. You know that we really strive to make sure that we end on time, so we wanted to bring folks back. However, if you still had things you wanted to share or do or discuss, that document isn't going to close today. Melissa can maybe chime in with an exact amount, but I think, you know, for the next several days at least, that document will be available. So go ahead and jump into that document today, tomorrow, as things come to mind that you can put there. Again, at this stage, we're not looking for consensus building. It's just a matter of discussing and learning what some of the options are. I'm hoping that a few of us can kind of share out. I don't know if she knows that she was already nominated, but Sarah, I'm hoping that you can share a little bit about some of the things that you talked about in your group.
Sure. Let's see if I can remember it all, because my mind just starts going down a little path. But let's see. We talked about the disconnect between student preparation in middle school and high school in STEM career development, and then once they get to college. I used to work at Case Western. I did STEM equity work there, and we would see kind of a disconnect with folks that are traditionally underrepresented in the STEM spaces, either because of social and cultural influences, microaggressions, you know, who is meant to be in STEM, but then also in preparation. So a connection between what they're actually learning in high school and what's expected of them in college. And we thought about addressing that on a national level and actually mandating that universities review their course curriculum for intro level classes, because a lot of times what you see is intro computer science is not intro at all. It assumes a certain level of understanding, which certain people are going to have and certain people are not. So if you were in your computer science club in high school, you're ready to go in that intro class. But if you weren't, you're probably already behind. So Harvey Mudd College is a great example of one that has done this well. And so kind of making that a national expectation to review curriculum, make sure there aren't weeder courses, but intro is actually intro, and just re-looking at kind of the systems that are at play that are weeding people out. We also talked about informal STEM learning and the need for kind of collaboration and evaluation and more community level resources rather than just targeted towards institutions alone. And there was one other piece. Incentivizing colleges or universities for completion in STEM among women and minorities. So one of the problems with making sure that these intro level courses are truly intro and addressing some of the cultural issues that are at play that do keep people out is there's no incentive to do that. The way it's been done is comfortable for the people that are in power there. So making sure that there's some sort of accountability or some sort of financial incentive or something that presses universities to actually take a look at their systems and make change rather than just rolling with how it's always been done.
Boy, do I love that. Alyssa messaged me and said you really need to have Sarah talk, and that's why. That's really outstanding. I know that at least from my perspective and some other folks that are on this call that I know that I've worked with in the past, we see that. Computer science is a perfect example. APCSA is, I think, the only AP course that is really hard and has no prerequisite courses. And a lot of kids get in there and fail. And a lot of kids don't even try because they don't know they have those prerequisites. So it sets up this division. Similarly and related, I think it's possible that it might be worth exploring how teacher certifications for these different careers, or I'm sorry, these different courses work as well. Sarah, thank you for sharing. Could somebody from group 3, that's the Amanda, Karen, Katie, Becky Rinaldo group, somebody from that group share out for us?
I'll go ahead and share.
Thanks.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. So we had some great conversation. Like I said, we had a big want list, which is great. A lot of it tied around to accessibility for STEM for students, and thinking about training programs. And a lot of those are only available. There's a lot of specialized programs out there, but it's only available to the best and the brightest at this time. And how does it become more available to all? Some other questions that we had, of course, was how do we integrate out of school time learning better into schools? And some of the answers to the both of these were the fact that, especially if we're looking at like curriculum revision within the state, that a lot of times, we all know we have issues sometimes with the curriculum in Ohio, and that we don't find where we fit into this. But if we can find a way to work with the curriculum developers at the state level and say, you can get credits for out of school time learning. You can get training credits for being in this program that maybe is external to the school, and just making it more accessible that way. Something that I think Katie brought up, which was nice too, because we also talked about just even having access to buildings to run programming. And something that Katie brought up is that in Summit County with Akron, that not all of us were aware that these buildings are now community centers. Their schools are also community centers. So they're available and open to the community after 6 p.m. And that's another policy change that we could look at, since a lot of our schools, since the public schools are funded by community dollars, how do we help to make more of those schools available? Then we have more access to our communities right where they are, in order to provide the STEM programming that we want.
So not only in alignment with what Sarah talked about from that group, but also back to that equitable access problem. What I like about the conversation that you guys had is that it included some solutions that others are doing in that area that we should definitely be noting as examples of possible solutions. What about group 4, which is the Carrie, Jennifer, Terry group?
Sure. And we took notes on ours as well, so I can go back and clean those up afterwards if the document's going to stay open. But there were a couple of things that jumped out to me that came up in our discussion. One, which came up a little bit in the earlier discussion today, the town hall, had to do with training teachers, especially in the science area. We talked a little bit about teachers not necessarily having a lot of training ahead of time in science, and they tend to stay away from that at some of the younger grades, and how we get enough training to them, and not only the teachers in traditional setting, but making sure that the net is broad enough to include teachers in non-traditional settings, either homeschoolers or special needs teachers, et cetera. If you're looking at building out that training and having ready-made materials available to them. The other thing that came up though, which just to kind of tag on to what an earlier group was talking about with the preparation from high school to college and where that gap can be, is that there's a gap from college to the workforce, and you can major in these different things and then leave college and find that you don't have an actual job there to fit a bachelor's degree in biology. Actually was one of the examples that Jennifer was giving. They're hiring PhDs and master's level people and stuff like that, and people with certain specialties, but there needs to be a lot more discussion with the kids all along, starting at earlier ages, about what it really takes to be in certain professions. And maybe you have to put more than one major together, and how to think of things more in a career oriented way instead of specifically what you're majoring in college.
Terry, I have a master's degree in linguistics. Do you know what you can do with a master's degree in linguistics?
You're an awesome moderator.
With a master's degree in linguistics,
Right.
You can get a PhD in linguistics. That is
Yeah.
that is the only route you have with that very expensive degree that I got. All right. So I'm still seeing a lot of alignment here in I think 3 different categories. But I want to hear from that last group and maybe from one other person. So that last group is the Amani Emily Alexander group. Someone willing to share from that group. I mean, Amani, I know is willing to share. Is somebody else
I don't want to say
share?
anything. I'm
Just to
always the
mix
one
it up.
talking.
Just
So
to mix it up.
Alexander, Emily, this is on you. I'm sick of hearing my own voice.
Emily.
Sure, I'll share. I mean, we talked about teacher education, making sure that classrooms also have state-of-the-art equipment that they would use then in their career in the future. Alex's idea, I think that's most policy is incentivizing business investments in STEM high schools and middle school programs through tax incentives and job dollars for young adults transitioning out of high school. And so thinking about a similar incentive program for community colleges as well. So could we incentivize our business partners to invest in our schools, knowing that through that investment, they'll gain employees at the other end. And we talked a little bit about the idea of a career pipeline and not always a college pipeline. That there are lots of jobs, skilled trade jobs, especially here in Ohio, a huge manufacturing state. And they're good jobs too that pay well, but we don't have the skilled workforce for that. So making sure that we're partnering in a way that puts kids on a path that is a good, sustainable job for them. I think I covered that. And then we started to talk about this regional and local STEM priorities and, connectivity issues, digital redlining in both urban, but I also talk about rural communities. We're seeing that in the Girl Scout community, that the rural schools are being forced to go back to school in this pandemic because the kids just don't have broadband access. And they aren't able to have the same types of educational experiences that other kids are having. And so we really feel pretty strongly that, connectivity, broadband access is a critical infrastructure issue that needs to be addressed. And then we
Perfect.
didn't get to talk about the last one.
That's okay. That's okay. Frankly, we'd rather you dove deep to the extent possible. I will encourage Emily, your group, and the rest of your groups, if there's questions that you didn't get to, or you didn't get to them deep enough, to go back into that document and add content. Alyssa, I think we need to dig into this a little more, but I at least am seeing three kind of themes, overall themes, I think, and everyone on this call, please jump in if I'm missing something. But it seems like everything that was mentioned fits into one or more of these buckets: equity and access to facilities, courses, and technology, alignment of curriculum, and alignment of degrees to jobs. I think those are kind of the three buckets that hit most of this content. So before we end, in these last several minutes, we'd like to ask you a question and get a little bit of feedback from you. Ideally, some of the folks who haven't had a chance to talk yet, but from everyone. What we're wondering is this: what is unfair about STEM in Northeast Ohio? Some of it you already discussed, right? It is unfair that you have to have a background in CS to be successful in APCSA, and therefore lots of kids are left behind and don't have that opportunity. But what else? In school, out of school, adults, communities, what's unfair? Where are we really struggling as a Northeast Ohio community? This is always the quietest group of smart people I've ever known.
I think sometimes it's unfair that kids in wealthier communities get to do STEM for fun. And I mean that in that they have Science Olympiad and they have engineering club and they can go to science camp and have fun. And kids that don't have the means, science can sometimes be a worksheet, or science is what they have to do in school. And it is not what my dad would say, a vocation versus an avocation. It is it's the meat and potatoes that has to be done. It's not the fun.
You know what I love about that, Emily, is that what I think that those more affluent kids gain from that is not only maybe an understanding of career paths, because that's great. But if we start assuming that everyone's going to be an engineer, we're going to have the opposite problem we have now: too many engineers and all this stuff. It's that, and I say this a lot. Some of you have heard me say this before. I have 3 siblings. I do whatever it is that I do. My sister is in copywriting and advertising. My brother is a firefighter and a paramedic. My little sister used to teach, now swims with sharks at the Cleveland Aquarium. All 4 of us use STEM competencies every single day of our lives in our jobs. All 4 of us had those opportunities as kids and those skills that we're able to apply and that help us continue to be successful in all of our jobs. And not everyone has that. They don't have those experiences. They don't have those different ways of thinking about problems. So Emily, I really love that. What else? Access to fun STEM. What else? Anything?
We spoke about this a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, Amanda.
Okay. I did just want to also say that I think we have to reframe some things because, well, I have 2 points and you just inspired me on another point. The one thing is teachers' access. Like that's another thing. Like I've been going to conferences and I just went to ISTE, if you're familiar, International Society of Technology and Education Conference. And there were very few teachers represented from Northeast Ohio. And I looked every single day. And so I know that in the case of funding, teachers don't necessarily have access to be able to attend a conference that costs $800. And then even more if it were not virtual, traveling to California or wherever the conference may be. And so not having access to those things because they're learning things that kids will really benefit from. And so if teachers are not enthusiastic about STEM in all of their classes, because even in the English class, there's room for STEM. If they're not enthusiastic about it, then they're not going to enthusiastically present it to students. It's going to be a job and it's going to be miserable for all of them. The other thing is we have to reframe how we look at students because they have the capabilities to be able to solve these problems because they do it every day. If it's figuring out how they're going to get to school and they don't have any money, if it's figuring out how they'll get clean clothes, if it's figuring out how to stretch food, they have all kinds of problem solving capabilities that are inherent to the experience with poverty and a whole lot of other things that they do that are very adult on a day-to-day basis. And so we need to explore how they can present problems that they experience in their communities because they're all STEM based. And so if it's nutrition, if it's health issues, if it's infrastructure issues, they are on the ground with those problems. And so they have a deep ability to be able to solve them. And many of them want to. It is just us bridging the opportunity for them to be able to get a hands-on opportunity to be able to solve those problems.
Absolutely, Amanda. Thank you. Those are some really, really excellent components. I see Alyssa nodding along because this is all really, really quality content and paths that we can go down to do this deeper dive into NeoSTEM as part of this report. Monty, unless somebody jumps in, you may be the last. So unless somebody else raises their hand, can you close us out with your thoughts?
No one else. All right. It's quick and it's a reiterated point. We've definitely talked about this before, but it's a personal example for me, just as far as getting the students to be able to see themselves represented in the fields and trying to make it like relatable through that. So for me, it's so difficult to get kids to really get into STEM programming because they don't know any engineers or know any biologists or any like doctors immediately in their lives. And while I sit here and try to talk up all these STEM programs, my like background's more in social work and I'm doing youth programming, but not doing exact like sciences. So really just well, I guess not even working towards anything, but what I find is a like problem in my own job and something I struggle with personally. It's just trying to get them to relate and find these goals as like achievable goals, being like, oh, I can do that when I'm older, when they look all around them and see no one that looks like them doing it. So finding ways to connect the students in the schools, and this is something our group talked about a little bit, just with like organizations in the community, different like mentors potentially, which is something we've talked about in previous meetings, is like get in partnerships with different mentoring programs so they can see people like tangible examples in their lives of how they could do those jobs, which those people could then give them ideas about what subjects they should study in school or different people they should talk to in the community that can help get them to those points. So really just, yeah, finding those connections and establishing those and getting those like kids around us to know that like, hey, you can come from this neighborhood, go to a school that may not have the most updated equipment, all this, but you can still end up in these fields and be very successful in it.
Thank you, Amani. I want to mention one more that Alexander typed in that I agree with. This is an issue that I ran into when I was in the mentor schools, and it took me 6 years to solve this problem, which is that a lot of times STEM disciplines, engineering, design thinking, computer science, they're considered specials or electives. And what that means is that if there's a student who's behind in reading or math, that's what they lose. They lose that, or they lose art, or they lose music. That's what happens. We take away these things that inspire kids, that bring new ways of thinking, that offer new opportunities and excitement for school. We take those away so that they can have more of the thing that isn't resonating with them. So I agree 100%. Alexander says that, just to add, it's unfair. The kids who are not at grade level in reading or math don't get access to STEM experiences, despite the fact that they might find their passionate connection to learning that way, which I think is another critical component. All right, well, that brings us to 5 o'clock. I'll tell you that this document that Alyssa is working on with, and Veronica, who's on this call as well, is moving really fast. This is not a long-term project. This is an incredibly short-term project, meaning that if you have things to add to that document looked at today, or if other related things that don't quite fit in that document pop up in your minds, let us know them. Let Alyssa know them ASAP. It's really a good opportunity for our region and for the country, but it's a small window. So please make sure that that happens. And then Alyssa, I think we're together again in 1 month. Is that right? Yes, Alyssa's nodding.
Yeah, we'll reach, yeah. I was just
And
gonna say, we'll reach out with, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just going to say, and in 1 month, I pledge that Alyssa's internet is going to work. Finally. February is the month of Alyssa internet. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you all again in a month. Again, complete that document if you need to add more. Email Alyssa if you come up with other thoughts, and we'll be reaching out to you to move forward with this work. Bye, everyone.